So welcome everyone to the start of the 2021 Mendoza Dean's Speaker Series. It's so good to be back at this in person, and we very much appreciate you all coming today. I'm Martin Kremers. I serve as Dean of Mendoza, so I'm the Dean of the Mendoza Dean's Speaker Series. Today's talk is a fireside chat with Muffet McGraw. We shouldn't take that too literally because we don't have a fireside. But we do have Muffet McGraw. And we do hope that this is an enlightening experience, even without the fireside. Muffet really doesn't need any introduction, but I will provide a few reminders. She's one of just 5 coaches in the NCAA Division I history with more than 930 wins. She won 2 NCAA national championships in 2001 and 2018, and was the 13th female coach inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2017. She had previously been inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 2011 and the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame in 2014. Muffet has become an important voice in the fight for gender equality and how to implement changes in national and collegiate sports. Her recent book, Expect More, Dare to Stand Up and Stand Out, was available at the entrance. If you advises women seeking to advance, and really all readers, but especially women, seeking to advance their leadership skills to, and now I quote, approach every opportunity not only with confidence, but also with swagger. She's currently teaching a course in sports leadership in Mendoza, which we're so grateful for, and also serves as a studio analyst for ACC Network. I'm also pleased to introduce our moderator, Ann ten Brunsel, one of our own very star faculty. She serves as the David E. Gallo Professor of Business Ethics and is the chair of the Department of Management and Organization. Ann's research area is in the psychology of ethical decision-making, examining why employees, leaders, and students behave unethically sometimes, despite their best intentions to behave to the contrary. She's the author, co-author, or co-editor of 6 books on this topic, as well as numerous academic journal articles. So I'm very grateful for your participation. Welcome, Muffet and Ann. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Muffet, for doing this. I know everybody is very excited, and I think I echo the sentiment of the audience that we can't wait to hear about your words of wisdom that you've garnished over those 900 plus wins, but also over the failures, as you talk about in your book. The format here that we're going to use is I'm going to ask a few questions, and we're going to try to have a dialogue. Martin told me to talk about my own leadership experience. I'm like, I don't think anybody's here to see or hear from Ann ten Brunsel, so I will keep that to a minimum. We've got the expert here. And then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience, and I'll conclude with a kind of a general question at the end. So the first thing I wanted to ask Muffet, because I was shocked when I read the book, we think there's inequities now. There were a lot of inequities that existed way back when you started. So can you give us a flavor of a few of them and how you handled them?
Well, I started playing basketball in the 60s, and if you can believe it, the Catholic Church was ahead of the curve. We actually had girls basketball before Title IX in the late 60s in Philly. So when Title IX came in, it really didn't change too much of what we were doing. I went to St. Joe's in Philly, and we would sit on the sidelines and watch our men's team practice and just wait for them to decide when they were going to finish. And then their JV team would come in, and we would wait and see when they would finish, and then we were allowed to get on the court. Well, back then, we bought our own shoes, we wore our own clothes, we had to do our own laundry, we drove ourselves to the games, so we really didn't have anywhere close to what they have now. I graduated in 1977, so you fast forward 10 years, I got the head coaching job at Notre Dame, and almost my first day here, one of the men's assistants came up to me and said, here's how it works. We practice when we want, for as long as we want, and then you guys get the court. And I was like, wow, Title IX really made its way all the way to South Bend, Indiana. And I think as a woman, you have to choose your battles. It's a lot like parenting. I mean, there are so many fights that we could fight all the time. And I think, we're better served if we wait and kind of choose what battles we want to pursue. And so I kind of let that go and figured, eventually somebody's going to intervene and we're going to have a schedule of what goes on in the arena here. But we didn't. So a few years later, things got better. Things continued to get better. Salaries were not equitable. I played in the first women's pro league in 1980 for a salary of $11,000. And I was thrilled to death that I was getting paid to play basketball. But our checks didn't usually cash. So back then, you actually got a check. And so my husband would wait outside with the car running, and I would sprint out after practice, before showering, give him the check. He'd rush off to the bank. So we were one of the ones that would get the check to cash. And our team was the California Dreams. So I got him a T-shirt that said, "My wife is a dream." And yeah, it was great. I mean, we folded in the next year, the precursor for the WNBA. But I think we were pioneers back then. We got things going, and certainly where the league is today is light years away from when I started.
So when you talk about picking your battles for people out there, when should you pick your battles? I agree. Are there certain characteristics of a battle that would say this is enough to use my voice?
Yeah, I think you really have to pick and choose and decide what you want to fight for. And for me, it was for my staff. So I went to HR at some point in the late 90s and said, I don't know what the men's team salaries are, but we should be comparable to them. And at one point, after we won a national championship in 2001, I said, we maybe should be making more money than the men. And so they started looking at things, and they actually did make some changes. But I was, fighting for them and for what we had, in terms of marketing, in terms of pretty much everything we had. We would get the JV. We would get the sports information guy who was a rookie. We would get the marketing intern. We would get the person in academic services that had just started. So we were always kind of working with the JV support staff. And every time somebody got good, they moved them on. It's the same thing on ESPN. We have an anchor who's really good. We had Reese Davis, who was doing women's basketball. As soon as they get good, they move them over to the men's side. So we were kind of like the training program. And so, I decided that was a battle worth fighting. So I wanted to take that one in and talk about the salaries. And I'm not fighting for my salary, I'm fighting for them. And for, just a little more organization of what it goes. But you have to be educated. You have to know what the rules are and know when things are wrong.
And so that was successful?
Yeah, it was. It was. I think eventually we did get to a point where, we had a schedule of who was going to be on the court when, and then the men would take off and they'd say, "Oh, we're going up to Marquette. We're flying, and we're going to have a steak dinner at Ruth Chris before we go." And I was like, "We're busing and going to McDonald's. So let's take a look at this." And so that was something else that we had to get to change.
One of the things we know about fairness is we all kind of interpret it egocentrically, right? So what I think is fair is that which benefits me. What you think is fair is that which benefits you. I'm not saying you didn't. Yours was not egocentric. Yours seemed like real fairness or unfairness. Among your players, I'm sure there was all kinds of claims of unfairness, playing time, this, whatever. How do you handle that when it comes and it's not true or it's not in entirety true?
I think that one of the most important things about being a leader, there are certain things that every leader has to do. And the first is a vision of where you want to go. The second is a plan of how you're going to get there. And I think that in that plan, one of the things that I'm really big on is clear expectations. Everybody needs to know exactly what is expected of them. So I would go around the room, so my team would be sitting there, and I would tell each player, these are the 3 things I need you to do in order for us to be successful. And I would challenge them, so I would say, we need you to be one of the top 3 in scoring. And I would tell maybe 4 people, they need to be top 3 in scoring. Or I'd tell 3, they need to be the leading rebounder on the team. So they kind of are fighting it out among themselves. But they know exactly what their role is. They know who the 3-point shooters are and who are not. So when somebody that's not a 3-point shooter is wide open on the 3-point line and their mom and dad are yelling at them to shoot it, the girls are going no. That's not your job. So everybody knows what their role is. Everybody knows what's expected of them, including my staff. I have very distinct roles for my staff. And it's clear because I'm not just telling you, I'm telling you in front of the team. So everybody knows what everybody else's role is. If you don't like your role, that's what the summer's for. You come in, you work on it, you get better at it. But for us to win, this is how it's going to go. And so I think that's really important, that everybody understands what their role is. And then at the end of the season, we would have an individual meeting and we would talk about, what did you do well? What do you need to improve on? What do you want to do more of? How can we expand your game? What things can you work on in the summer? So we didn't have a lot of conversations. Kids knew why they weren't playing. And I think that's so important because people don't want to be honest anymore. People do not want to have honest feedback. My son is 31, he works in the tech industry. He has his end of the year meeting and I said, what did they tell you that you need to work on? And he said, nothing. And I was like, well, I know there's some things that you can get better at, but I think that people are so cautious now about telling people, giving them constructive feedback, and I think that's a real problem. So I didn't have any problem being honest. I see one of my former players over here, Melissa Lecklander, she can vouch for that. I had to work on going from brutally honest to just honest, and that took some work, because being from Philly, sarcasm is kind of our native language, so I could be pretty tough on them.
One of the things I noticed in the book that you said is the benefit of having these clear expectations is when somebody screwed up, they said they would look over at you and they knew exactly the look you would be giving them because it was that clear. And that if they didn't own up to it, that the punishment was even harsher, right?
Yeah.
So not only knowing what I'm supposed to do, but also owning up to when I didn't.
Well, I think accountability is something else that in our society has gone by the wayside. I mean, people are not accountable. All we're doing is pointing fingers and blaming on everybody else. You can't even look at politics because it's just complete lack of accountability, and that is really important to me. And that's one of the things that my players said when they moved on to the WNBA. They found that there was a little bit of a lack of accountability there. But for me, I would get madder if I was in the huddle and I say, whose man was that? And nobody owned up to it. Because we film everything, and film doesn't lie, so you're going to find out tomorrow. And so they were really good at, that was my man, that was my rotation, I should have had that. And then I'm going to leave you in the game, But if you're like, I ain't saying anything right now, then you're going to probably suffer for that. So we really made accountability something that was just one of our core values. And that goes for me too. So after the game and the press conference, I can't go in there and just talk about what they did wrong. I mean, I have to be accountable for everything because everything comes back to me. So maybe it's something we didn't work on enough. I didn't stress it enough. Maybe the game plan wasn't what it should have been. So I think it's important for me to role model that sort of accountability for my team.
It's funny, that reminded me of something that happened to me when I was in engineering or in consulting. There was a situation, we had a big client, and for some reason, two things sorted differently. And so all the data was wrong. It went to this big client. And Prabha, who was the head of, it was called ZS Associates, so he was the S of ZS. And he said to me, he goes, this is a huge problem. He goes, get down to my office. And I said, should I bring Nick too? Because Nick was the one that was involved, who did this. He goes, nope, this is on you. So that was actually one of the best lessons I could have had, it was on me, that even though it was on him and the technology, and we could point fingers. Ultimately, I held responsibility. So I think that's a great lesson for people of today. You said you became maybe less harsh in your feedback, and I noticed that you talked about stereotypes that players had, stereotypes that you felt initially you had. And so I'd love you to detail those, but then also, there's a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Do we conform to stereotypes? If not, how do we not conform and not suffer maybe some of the consequences? So.
Yeah, we struggle with stereotypes. When I came to Notre Dame, my leadership style was the commander, authoritative dictator. I mean, I was in charge, and you were going to get in line, or you were not going to be on the team. And I would go home, my husband would say things like, oh, what did the team think? What'd the players say? And I was like, what did they say? I'm not asking their opinion. I'm telling them what to think. And gradually, as the generations changed, and then with the millennials came in, and then this generation, I realized that I had to change, because really, what you want to do is have kind of a culture on your team of, safety is really important, that everybody feels like they can say whatever they want. And when you're somebody that's, just thinking this is the way we're doing it, you're not looking for input, you're not going to be as successful because you don't have the buy-in from your team. So one of the things that we always did when we started the season was you guys decide what the goals are. You decide what you want to accomplish. And then we're going to talk about what do you got to do every day to make that happen. So now it's their goals. Now it's their team. And I would ask their opinion, especially the juniors and seniors, never the freshmen. And I would always say, after practice, boy, that 2-3 zone looked great today. What'd you think? What did you think of the zone today? What did you think of how we're guarding the ball screen? Do you like this? What works best for you? If the game comes down to a last second shot, what do you want? What do you want it to be? Do you want to come off a ball screen? Do you want a 1-4 low? You want some down screens? What can I run for you? So there was so much more back and forth, and that made it just so much better. Now for them, it's like, it's them. They say, yeah, the 2-3 zone looked good, and then we play the 2-3 zone the next day, and it doesn't look good. I'm like, it was your idea. But we're kind of, it's more of we're all in it together. So if things don't go bad, there's no finger pointing because I've become a lot more democratic, I would say, in the way I handle things. And certainly, there's not a democracy at the end of the game when we're deciding what we're going to run. But that is something that's really important. But the stereotypes are difficult. Our culture, just the way we're raised. I would challenge those of you who have daughters to say, do you raise them the same way you raise your sons? And I think the answer is no. We don't raise our daughters to take risks. We don't compliment them for, wow, that took courage. You really went out and got out of your comfort zone. And we don't talk to them about math and science and how to be a leader. For girls, we're taught to get along, to go along. Let's be a good sport. Don't make waves. Everybody's looking at you. You're supposed to be about harmony and about empathy. And I was none of those things. I was super competitive like my whole life, and I was always kind of battling against the stereotypes. Because when I was playing, it was not even accepted. It was me and 9 guys down at the playground, and that's how I learned how to get along kind of with men. And so it really helped me. But the stereotypes that we have now, I mean, you go to Target and look in the toy aisle. You got a pink aisle, you got a blue aisle. And, we're trying to go to gender neutral toys, but we're all working in this male dominated culture. I mean, every except for probably education. And you look at education and you say, well, 70% of our college presidents are men, 85% of our athletics directors are men. And now in sports, 40% of our coaches of women's sports are women, only 40%. So we have 60% of our coaches are men. And back before Title IX in the 70s, 90% of the coaches were women. So when Title IX, gave us a lot of good things, it also changed some things and made it easier for men to come over.
It's interesting. Sometimes, too, stereotypes, people's perception of whether you're conforming to the stereotype are completely wrong. I remember I was going out on the market, as it's called, after a graduate program, and my advisor was saying to all the women, his wife, and the other women faculty, I'm just worried Anne's not going to be assertive enough. People are like, are we talking about the right Anne? Like, she has zero problem being assertive. So he was conforming me to the stereotype, and it actually wasn't even necessarily true. I think it's important to think about that. I'm so glad to see it in your book. There's a lot of new research on what's called covering, and people cover their identities to fit into a team, into an organization, into a culture. And it's incredibly damaging. I think the highest end is upper 80s for LGBTQ. But even white male, which you say, what would you have to cover, is 45%. And covering leads to kind of inauthenticity, it leads to emotional labor, and it leads to bad performance, it leads to unethical behavior. So I think really delineating what's the stereotype and do I feel the need to cover up. And I would also say when you don't conform to the stereotype, it allows other people to not conform either, right? You just kind of need one, and then people will kind of feel released. So it was great to see that. You also really kind of emphasize that women don't support each other enough. And if you saw the news today with Katie Couric saying, yeah, sometimes I felt territorial when other women were vying for my job. It's easy to say we should support each other, but we know that we often don't know if, I don't know I'm not supporting someone. So, right, I think I am, but probably I'm not. And so what would you recommend for people that are on the receiving end of the no support? What should they do? Or what should we be doing to try and get more people to support each other and not be in this territorial fight?
Yeah, I think we have a problem as women because there were so few of us in C-suites and on Fortune 500 company boards that it was always a token situation where like one woman maybe get a seat at the table, and so we were so much in competition with ourselves because we're like, I'm going to get that one spot that's available, and I think that. First, I'd like to see change is that there are more spots available. We just recently have one woman on every board of the Fortune 500 companies across the country, just recently. And that's just one woman. So we have a long way to go. But I think that we need to do a better job of networking. Women are terrible networkers. I mean, when we got to get our kids to soccer practice, we are the best networkers in the world. Somebody's going to organize dinners for the week because, there was something happening in the family. Like, we're great at that. But we are terrible at networking for business. And nobody ever taught us how, because the guys are doing it on the golf course and sporting events, they meet somebody and immediately they're trying to figure out, how can this guy help me? We meet somebody at the ACC meetings in the spring who works for the Yankees, and, we're going to go to New York, and my husband's like, oh, call that guy and ask him for tickets for the Yankee game. And I was like, wow. I mean, we just barely knew the guy. And that's how men work. And they're diving in and playing golf and doing things together, and we're judging. We're looking at each other and we're going like, I don't know. I don't know if I like what she's wearing. I don't know if I like what she's saying. I don't like that she stays at home, or I don't like that she works, or we're just really judging people all the time. And so I think we have to look at ourselves a little bit more and say we got to be more open and say that. And then when people do ask us for stuff, I'm like, dang, that's really courageous of you to ask for that. I don't. But so we need to change our own way of thinking about that. That's typical of a guy. We need to do better. We need to learn how to network, and that's a skill we don't learn. We don't learn it here. You have to kind of teach yourself, and we need men to advocate for us and to bring us in, and to show us how that works.
Muffet and I were talking before this started, and there's a whole a book, somewhat old now, but it's a whole line of literature called "Women Don't Ask," particularly in negotiations. This is true, and like when you can challenge in tennis, they don't ask as much, and the outcomes are the same when there is a challenge. There's a study done at Harvard of MBA students, 57% negotiated salary, 7% of women did, but the outcome was the same. I don't want to say that's the reason why pay inequity is because people don't ask, but I do think it's a very important part, like ask for the tickets, ask for this, right? You're never going to get an answer you want if you actually don't ask the question first, right? I mean, don't quit waiting for people to, in some sense, come to you, right?
But women look at things so differently. So if there's a job open, women are looking and saying, oh, there's these 5 qualifications that you need. Darn it, I only have 4. We're checking boxes of what we don't have. Men are going, I got 2 of those, I can learn the rest. I mean, that's just the way they look at it. They have a lot more confidence going in. And we're very kind of literal, like, no, this is the rule. They said that they needed these 5 things in order for us to do that. And then when men go for jobs, I've had some male assistants, and when I looked at their resume, and I see all the things they've taken credit for that I kind of thought I did, but that's good that you think so highly of yourself. And so a job opens, and men they're on the phone. They're calling like this guy that they knew in grade school who works at this school who might know the basketball coach on the men's side to get him on, to get a women's job. They're really using people and networking a lot better. And women, like the females on my staff, would come in and go like, would you mind sending a letter of recommendation for this? Like we're not looking at it the same way. And I think that I read an article in the Harvard Business Review. I just like to throw that out. Harvard Business it sounds so good. And it was entitled, "Why Do We Promote Incompetent Men?" And the answer is because what it takes to get the job is not the same skills it takes to do the job. So the men come in, man, they're selling it. They're like, I'm going to win you a national championship. This is what I'm going to do for you. And the women are like, I don't know. Because when men talk, they start with I. Here's what I did. Here's what I can do for you. And when you say something to a woman, it's like, we. It's always we. Well, my staff did such a great job. Oh, my team, everybody just came together. And even if you watch press conferences, when they ask questions, my team, they're always complimenting somebody else on the team. It's always about the we and not the I. And, when men get complimented, man, you did a really good job on that project. What do they say? Thank you. They say thank you. What do women say? Oh, my staff, my team. We immediately deflect. Like, why don't we just say thank you? Because when we get criticized, boy, we take that personally. Oh, wow, man, I didn't do that, or that, you know. But when we're complimented, we deflect that. So we need to do a better job of just saying thank you and saying I sometimes. Because when you go in to get a job, people want to hear what you can do.
I think in addition to what we're not doing, there's structurally sometimes things that contribute to that. So there's research that our job descriptions can be gendered. So you can actually run your job descriptions through a decoder. I did it for a few positions of ours, Martin, so I'll let you know the results. We did good on one. But even performance reviews, like the same behavior, it might say, oh, he's a real go-getter, aggressive, which can have a positive. She has sharp elbows. Right? And so it's the same behavior, but described differently, some in positive terms. So I think we have to kind of look at all of the pieces ourselves, and then if we're leaders, what are we doing in those performance reviews or in looking for people?
Yeah, it's so important. They use different words to describe women than they do to describe men, and we are walking a tightrope. I mean, we are told to, hey, you know, you got to sell yourself, you got to promote yourself, but not too aggressively, because women are supposed to be humble. And, you know, you have to fight for what you want, but not too loudly, you know, because you don't want to be seen as, you know, being something else. You know, and men are confident to the point of arrogance, and that's okay, because that's expected of men. But women, boy, if we start to talk about I and what I did, it's a real negative connotation.
And I think, reiterating what you said, being confident allows you to do some of those things, to break the mold, to stand out, right? Because people pick up on that. I think men or women, being confident, people go along with you more than if you act kind of wishy-washy.
They really do, and it's funny because to be at Notre Dame and my team, okay, they're smart and they're talented right off the bat, you know, when they come to Notre Dame. And the biggest thing that we worked on was confidence. They did not have confidence. You know, it would kind of go up and down a little bit depending on how they were playing, and it was amazing to me that they could be so talented and still doubt themselves so much. And so we really worked on that, and that was in some ways my biggest job, that I had to really build their confidence. So I had to watch what I was saying, how I was saying it. You know, I asked for their opinion a lot more, so they got to the point where they're like, wow, she really wants to listen to me. She really hears what I'm trying to say. We put things on the mirror in the locker room, like I am strong, I am courageous, I am relentless, I am, you know, determined. So all these things that they could look at every day, because, you know, if you have daughters, anybody from, I think women's confidence peaks at like age 10 or 11 or something. We don't get it back. Then it goes downhill. We don't get it back till we're in our 20s. And sometimes we never get it back. And, you know, the way we treat other women, if somebody, one of our friends, like, I'm going to go for this job, we're like, oh my gosh, you're going to be great for this, this, and this. You definitely need to apply. And then it's our turn, and we're like, I don't know if I can do it. And so we always doubt ourselves. So I think building confidence, there's a great book called The Confidence Code that I read it's just phenomenal, because we're all battling the same thing, you know, and it's just funny to hear all these talented women saying, like, I don't know if I'm good enough.
Yeah. Along with women, there's men. So what did the men in your life do? Positive, negative, and maybe more generally, how can men that really want to be allies and support women, what are some of the more effective tools or techniques that you've seen?
Well, I was fortunate. I was almost always the only girl. Me and 9 guys at the playground. I came to Notre Dame. I got invited to a golf outing. It was me and like 287 men, I think it was. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm going to win the ladies division. I can't wait to get that new driver, maybe a putter, and maybe some clothes. This is going to be awesome. We get to the event, and they're giving out the prizes for the men. They call me up, and they gave me bubble bath. And I was like, wow, this is a real test for my face to say that's going to be okay. You know, so you got to have those moments. And you just want somebody in the audience, one of the guys to go like, well, that really wasn't a great gift, was it? Like, is it me? So we need men to see it. You know, we need men to have daughters. I think if every guy had a daughter, that would be great, because, you know, then you're seeing what's happening when they go out to play sports at a younger age. You know, I would love to see moms coaching instead of it's always somebody's dad. You know, these 5- and 6-year-olds go out. So then, you know, that helps change the stereotype. But it's really difficult for people to look up and see leadership when it's always a guy. So we need men to kind of pull us in. We need men who are at the table advocating. Yes, we need a mentor, but we need a guy that's actually in the room saying, no, you really need to hire her. She really would be good. Wouldn't it be great if we had a little more diversity in here? And so we need men to do that and to see it. And for me, I had just a great partner. I mean, I could not have done what I do without my husband. He changed his life to help with our son because I was traveling, and he learned how to cook, and he does laundry, and all the things that you need somebody to do, because people used to joke, you need a wife. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you need somebody who can help you and support you and can continue to have your back on things. And I think that we need more people out there that are willing to.
I loved your quote in there. Your son came home from a play date, and he said, Mom, you won't believe it, the mom cooks at the house. So I love that. Talk about kind of a Mythbuster. It's interesting. One of my advisors was Maggie Neal. She's at Stanford. She's like 6'2". She's the most intimidating person I've ever met. I was afraid to go approach her. But anyway, we eventually are good colleagues and good friends. And being aware is so important because I couldn't believe, she said, I was getting talked over in meetings at the provost's office. I'm like, you? Like, you are, like, that would not be true. She said, no, for sure. And the provost was unaware. So I said, I want you to keep a piece of paper by your side and note the number for each person, how many times they're interrupted. And by the end of the meeting, he said, I can't believe it. It was all the women. But he wasn't aware, and he was a very good advocate, which is why he did this. Mm-hmm. But
the Supreme Court just had to change the way they hear oral arguments because the female justices were being interrupted too often. And so they found a way to fix it, but that somebody's got to raise the point.
Exactly.
And then everyone can see it.
And if you've got men that are allies, you can then feel comfortable to say, just watch. I want you to do this.
Yeah.
One thing, a postdoc that was here that just left, Nate Michael, he found that when men amplify a woman's voice in a meeting, say it's idea generation, not only are better ideas, so like that's a great idea, Muffet, not only are better ideas produced, but actually the man gains in status by being able to do that. So it's not, shouldn't be too much of a cost in doing that. So that's kind of a simple technique for the men in the room. Well, I've asked enough questions, so I'm very interested in what the questions are that you all have. We have two people that are Jean and Maggie, they're gonna take questions. So if you have one, just raise your hand and they will bring over a microphone.
I think we can probably hear.
How are you, Muffet?
Hey.
How do you think the NIL movement would impact a coach's ability to coach a great athlete who might be making a lot of money while at school?
I'm not a huge fan of the NIL as it is right now. I think there's some serious gender equity issues with it because when boosters and businesses are looking to give money, they're going to look first at football and then at men's basketball. There's a lot going on in social media where 15 of the top 20 influencers and the most people following them, they're women. But out of the thousands of women that are playing sports, it's a really small number. Right now, the men are in a pay-for-play situation, which I think is totally against all amateur and all college athletics. So in the big programs, they call their boosters, the coaches call them, we're not really supposed to be involved, but somebody calls the booster and say, need you to give this guy $20,000, okay? And then they call somebody else, I need you to give this guy $20,000. And so they're basically just paying their really good players, which is contrary to everything that we stand for in athletics. So I think it's a huge problem. I think it's a problem in the locker room if you have, I don't know about on the guys' side, but on the women's side, I can't imagine what it's like if somebody's making a lot of money and you're not, so you start thinking, well, if the coach would play me more, if the coach would let me shoot more, so that's going to, I think, make the transfer portal even bigger than it is now. So I think the chemistry issue is one that, but right now it's just anything. I mean, anything goes, and it's really, we're in a really bad place because the NCAA completely dropped the ball. This was coming 5 years ago. We knew it was coming. There were lawsuits 5 years ago, maybe more. Jack Swarbrick was talking about it 5 years ago. This is where we're heading. We need to do something. The NCAA did absolutely nothing. Sent it to Congress, was a complete train wreck. And so now, we have really no rules, and anybody can make money doing pretty much anything, or nothing, really. You don't have to do anything. Is it tied to performance? Does that put pressure on the athlete? Well, I'm getting this, Alabama quarterback's making $1 million. Same thing he was making last year, but he couldn't say anything about it. So I'm opposed. Oh.
Thank you. You both spoke about interruptions, and what would both of your advice be to women in business who find themselves getting chronically interrupted by men in business meetings, and how they deal with it? Do they need to interrupt back at some point? Have you experienced that, and how did you deal with it? I guess that's 2 or 3 questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't really experience that much, even though we have a lot of male coaches in our leagues. But I think most of the women are forceful, and I think one of the things is to bring it to their attention, as you did, and I think that's probably the best way. And even if it's just one guy, just tell one guy. You know, I know a woman. She used to text the guy under the table. She'd be like, "No, you need to be talking right now about this," you know, and trying to get the men to notice it. Really, that's the first.
Yeah, I would say. I think Martin knows I'm not shy at all about saying what I feel, but honestly, this is where I think, I don't know if I was when I was young. Certainly getting old really helps that. You know, the fallback position is pretty easy. But I do think women should also amplify other women, because again, you might feel territorial in the room. Is my idea getting heard? So the studies have mostly been done on you saying Anne had a great idea. But can I say you had a great idea, right? And I don't think, my guess is that occurs even less. So it wouldn't help me, but it might help the other women in the room. And I do think it makes sense to have the leader of that group be very cognizant. Just, you should be checking whether or not I'm being talked over more than everybody else. And I think that would be a very fair recommendation to give.
Yeah, and I think the women in the room should be like, yeah, I'm glad you agree with the point I made a few minutes ago. Let's talk more about that, because here's what I said earlier, in case you missed it.
And just to add to that, in the realm of kind of sexual harassment, let's just think of microaggressions. So not promoting your good idea, but kind of downplaying you. One voice counter to that by men, it makes a humongous difference. So it just takes one, and the rest of the people that are saying, oh, I think that's kind of bad that he said it, but nobody else is saying anything, so I guess I won't. If one person says it, you'll find more people. So I always tell my students, from undergrad to the executives, don't be the norm, right? Break the norm, and you'll be so surprised at how many people follow you because you took that first brave step.
You spoke a lot about creating a supportive and safe environment on your team, about leadership and things like that. I was wondering, what would you do in a situation where one of your teammates, or not teammates, one of your team players messed up, not on the court, but off the court, let's say missed a practice or got in trouble in school or got in trouble elsewhere? What would be your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's important to have rules. I'm a big rule follower. I like rules and I like consequences. So coming into the season, everybody knows, here's the rule book, here's what happens if you break the rules. So I think knowing in advance really helps, because it's so easy to say, well, this kid missed, well, you know, she really works hard and she never missed before, but this kid is constantly on the edge. So I think it helps when you have those clear rules already set out. And then depending on the situation, you know, I would talk to them about, you know, what happened, or if it's a continual problem, and see, you know, is there an underlying cause to that? Is there some reason why this isn't working? But you know, being late, I leave kids, so I always tell them, like, have that Uber app, because when the bus leaves at 2, we're out of here at 2. We're not waiting until 2:01. So they all knew, they sat there watching the McGraw time, and so they knew, you know, what time they had to be there. I think it's a great lesson to learn, to know, but knowing the rules in advance, I think. And then that's how you make rules. Something happens, and you're like, ooh, well, that wasn't in the rule book, so we better get that in there. So that's when it's a little dicey, when you don't know exactly how to handle it. But yeah, I think knowing is good.
You also had rules on social media, right? So, which was kind of related to the question, that is, don't let anybody else know, in fact, if you did screw up. What were those rules? And when we look at now Facebook and all the Snapchat and TikTok, what would be your advice to people, not even your team players, but everybody else?
You know, my rules for my team, first I said, tweet as if Father Jenkins is reading it. So that's the first thing. Second, what you're wearing. Make sure that what you're wearing is appropriate. And And then absolutely couldn't have anything in your hand. Certainly no alcohol, but people can, kind of put something in your hand that wasn't really there before by photoshopping it in. So like if you're in don't have anybody in the picture have any kind of alcohol with them. And then your language, we know what those initials mean. Like may not use those kind of initials, and don't retweet somebody whose name has something like that in it. So, we were pretty strict on what we could do. We also had a time frame of no social media, like 2 hours before the game, you put your phone away, and a half an hour after, because you need that cool down period when, you're ready to just come out with something and you need to be able to think about it. So we also had some parameters on that. And it worked pretty well. There's some coaches that say no social media during the year. Like you can't, Connecticut, like you can't be on Twitter during the season. That's against the rules. And I wanted to treat them like adults and have them obviously learn how to deal with that. And we were pretty good at that.
Questions? Thank you. Just out of curiosity, you've been to so many NCAA tournaments, and then to hear this past year they dropped the ball big time for the ladies, from the swag bags to where they stayed, how it was handled. It's an embarrassment, and this is the NCAA. If you were in charge, what changes would you make? Maybe you should be in charge. Let me start with that.
So Title IX is about to turn 50. And people wonder what progress we're making. And I say, just look at the NCAA tournament and you want to see we're moving backwards. And that's about culture. That's about a leader at the NCAA who does not value women. They've never tried to market our game. We are locked into this ESPN contract with 25 other sports. The corporate sponsors that go on with the men, they don't activate for the women because there's no incentive for them to do it. They wouldn't let us use March Madness. The women VP for basketball reports to the men's VP for basketball. So their structure was wrong. Everything they did, really, they completely violated all their own rules. Like they have non-discrimination and gender equity rules, and they violated all of them. And we need a change in leadership at the NCAA. And unfortunately, he got a vote of confidence from the Board of Governors while this was going on. So the Kaplan report, an outside law firm, did a report, and it came back with all these recommendations, which make perfect sense. And that was in June, and I think we got one thing. They said you can use March Madness logo. Big freaking deal, and people are falling over themselves. Oh, thank you. Again, women, we're getting the crumbs, and we're thankful for the crumbs that we're getting. And I'm like, what else you got for me? Get out your pencil and erase that line so that the women's VP reports to the chief. I'd love to see a woman in charge at the NCAA and see if things were different. But really, honestly, anybody would be better. Even a guy.
Say what you really feel.
Hi there. I was reading a few articles and getting back to the questions on the name, image, and likeness. With the changes that are coming at the NCAA, there's talk about paying the players as employees. And if that happens, what the articles say is that it's going to put a further stress on the budgets of the athletic departments at most universities, maybe not here. But they also said that it could cut down on the amount of teams that the colleges will sponsor. How is that going to affect Title IX, do you think?
Well, the players are thinking about forming a union. I think that's the big thing that's going on now. And I mean, I don't know why, but I wonder. So then, will they decide when they're going to practice? Will they decide what the rules are going to be for what we're doing and what we're willing to do? And we don't want to go here or there. And I think it really hurts coaches because people don't want to coach anymore because they don't coach the way they want to because they're afraid. They don't want to yell at somebody, or they're going to pop in the transfer portal, or they're going to do this, and they're going to march into the AD's office and say there's verbal abuse going on here. So there's a whole lot of issues that are going on right now that are really problematic. And I don't know enough about the money part of all this NIL. They're going to have to pay taxes on it. I'm not sure they know. Probably have not paid taxes on anything yet. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but the gender equity issue, you have to have enough sports. Teams have tried to drop sports. I think Stanford tried to drop sports. Other schools have tried to do it, and it is a gender equity issue. You have to meet the needs of the women that are interested in playing. So that's the problem. The numbers are skewed. You have to have as many women, and that's how you agree to Title IX. But I don't really know the answer to that question. Sorry. See, isn't that very nice of you? A guy would have just asked the question.
Hi, so you've been such an inspiration to women and coaches and the basketball world in general. Who is someone that kind of was a role model for you or an inspiration for you throughout your life?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was kind of my hero for a while. But when I was playing and when I was coaching in my younger years, there were no women that you could look up to. And so it was always men that were my mentors. And then Pat Summitt, from a distance, she was just an iconic person in our game, somebody that I really respected. But I just used to look at everybody, and I especially like to watch press conferences when teams lost and got upset, and what happened in the NCAA tournament when they got out. So I could kind of read and say like, oh boy, that's something I never want to say. You can always learn from other people. You learn from other people's mistakes, and everybody you meet has something to teach you. So you can learn what not to do and what you should do. But yeah, RBG was definitely one of my heroes.
Muffet, you've obviously overcome a lot of adversity in your career and in your life. What advice do you have to women about resilience?
I worry about the next generation because I think that we are lacking mental toughness. I think that parents have been so busy trying to fix things for their kids. They called them the snowplow parents. Let's get everything out of the way so they don't have to deal with anything. And then the pandemic hit, and parents couldn't fix it. And the kids just didn't have that grit. They didn't have the inner toughness that they needed to deal with that. And so we're seeing all these mental health issues now. So, I think parents can do a better job of letting their kids fail. And that's something that you hate to do it as a parent. You don't want to watch that happening, but you have to let your kids fail because that's how you learn. That's how you grow. You pick yourself up, and you dust yourself off, and you get back out there. And I think sometimes with women and girls, we're like, oh, let me give you a hug, like, I know it was hard, and like with boys, we're like, get up, get up and try again. So I think we got to raise them differently, and we have to teach them how to fight those battles a little bit more. Women take failure personally, and if a guy doesn't get a job, he's like, they probably had somebody in mind, it wasn't my fault. And we're like, wow, what did I do wrong? And so I think, again, it comes back to confidence, but that resilience of, try again, try again, try again. A lot of it is your mindset, and a lot of it's how you're raised, but you have to be, almost relentless. And I don't think we praise girls for being relentless. And I'm not sure we praise guys for being relentless either, but I think that's something that we just need to see. And in sports, you get to fail all the time. You get to fail, and that's how you learn. Our 2018 one national championship, we went down to Louisville and got beat by 40 on national TV on a Monday night, big Monday game. It was humiliating, embarrassing. It was like the worst loss in the history of our program. And we came back, and how we handled it and how we got back on track, made the difference in our season and went on to win the national championship. So, that failure, like we figured out what we're doing wrong, what we need to learn, and that's what you learn when you fail. You say, this is what we got to work on. How are you going to know that if you don't ever fail? You go for job interviews. I applied for every job in the Big Five in Philly. I didn't get any of them, and I was just like, well, they're lost. Let me see where else I can go. So I think you have to have that resilience, and you need somebody in your corner kind of backing you too. I think that really helps.
I think that notion of kind of popularizing failure, or at least uncovering it. I remember telling my kids a quote I had on a paper I submitted, and it was, the writing is torturous and the contribution is nil. Devastating as a brand new professor. And my kids are like, Mom, I've heard that story so many times. But I think it is important to kind of just say when you failed, to admit when you failed, because then people aren't going to be afraid to take the risks because the failure doesn't loom so large.
Right.
So I think just talking about failure might actually help us. There are more questions, I know.
I just have a quick comment. I want to know when the university is going to put a bronze statue of Muffet McGraw on the campus.
Thank you.
Do you have an answer?
Do we have one more?
There's
There's
a,
a guy up
I think
there.
there's a question up there.
No.
So what did you think of John Wooden, and did you use any of his coaching philosophies in your coaching?
Yeah, I love John Wooden. He loved women's basketball too. He thought it was a much purer game. It was similar to when he was coaching. The women's game was definitely a lot different. Playing below the rim, and it's just a little more strategic. I've had tremendous respect for him. I read all his books. I had his triangle, Pyramid of Success. He was just a great guy who continued to really support women and women's basketball.
I think there's a question.
Hey, Muffet. You talked about how your leadership changed over the years to become, I guess, a little more democratic and asking your team to set the goals as opposed to it being imposed by you. Would be curious if there are any instances or years where your goals were just a lot more aspirational than the team's and how you would handle those types of situations.
We had the opposite, actually. So they picked the goals, and sometimes I'd be in the back of the room going like, no chance we're doing that, But like that's a tough call for the leader because you don't want to, put water on their confidence. You want them to think that we can be good. And really, we never talked about national championships until we actually got to the Final Four, and then the next year, then you can talk about that. But we were the opposite. We always had really high goals. I had a really high bar. I was never satisfied. Always, always expecting more. And my last year, we graduated 5 people to the WNBA. We went over the team rules in the locker room, and they were like, we want to, win the ACC, and we want to, get to the, Final Four probably or something. We want to do all these things. And I knew there was no way that was going to happen. And so my mistake was actually letting them pick the goals. I should have just, at that point, said, you know what? There's a whole new team. Let's see how it goes. But then once we got into it, I couldn't figure out how to get out of it. Because I couldn't say, you guys are delusional. You have no chance of that. And we really didn't. I was the only happy person when they canceled the NCAA tournament because we probably weren't going to go. So I was cheering that decision on. So our streak was still alive. Question?
Hi, Muffet. Thank you. You talked about building confidence in your players. When you have players that are coming from other cultures, even that are more maybe unfamiliar to your own culture, for example, I was raised in a home as a Black woman where I should speak out and be bold and step out and be confident. Maybe I'm even a little overconfident sometimes, and that can be kind of a conflict with women raised in a culture that were more like, just go along, or kind of some of the things that you were saying. And so when you are working with women coming from various backgrounds, how do you address that and building confidence across? Thanks.
I think first on your staff, you need to have a diverse staff, and you need to have a staff that complements each other. I want everybody on the team to feel comfortable talking to someone. Doesn't have to be me. So I want to make sure that I have somebody that looks like them on my staff, so that they can look back and say, this is what I'm dealing with, and maybe somebody else went through that too. I like having an alum, so they know this is what it's like to be at Notre Dame. We have all these people come in all from different places. Generally Notre Dame has some core values that everybody pretty much is on board with. So, we come in, we say, this is what we're doing. These are our core values. These are the rules. This is the way we want to be represented. This is the way we want people to see us. And we get the buy-in, but we talk to them a lot. Like, what do you want? What do you see? What are your core values? I want to incorporate all this. So I think it's like a real open culture of belonging. And so that's what we want. We want everybody to feel safe. Yeah, you come from a different background. So what's it like for you? What do you need? We bring them all together, and that's why I think sports is like a microcosm of society, because we can do things with all this great diversity that we have that we're struggling with around the country. So I think it's important to have the staff that can relate to each person too. I think we're done.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you identify and cultivate leaders among your staff and among your players? Team leader, whether it's a star player or some ultimate architects, and also assistant coaches and other members of your staff. How do you note that someone might be moving on to another position and cultivate them to succeed in that role?
I'll talk about the staff first. I think first it's important, for me, I want to have someone that's going to address my weaknesses. My strength is 5-on-5, looking ahead, the kind of big picture. They need to be looking at different things. So my job is to make them ready to be a head coach. So I'm going to give them responsibilities in different areas. And initially we'll start out in what they're good at. This is what you're good at. This is what you're going to do. And then we'd have a professional development during the break. I'd say, go watch Tom Izzo practice. He does this great thing with rebounding. Go watch the Bulls. Go watch whoever you want to watch and learn, and keep learning. And then at the end of the year, we'd have that same kind of meeting. What do you think you need to do to be a head coach? What else can you work on? So I would change their job description a little bit. And, maybe you want to be more involved with the offense or the scouting, or maybe you need to know what's happening to the budget. You need to go out and speak more. Maybe you should be going to Rotary and taking that job off my plate, which would be nice. So, trying to get them to do things that are going to, and then, at practice, when you have the scouting report, like, you're in charge, you're addressing the team, let's go, you're on. So you show the film and you tell the team, this is what we're going to do, this is what they do. You're the expert in them, this is what they're going to do, and here's how we're going to counteract it. So I give them that opportunity, and at practice, you got this team, you got that team. So I think they're getting a lot of practice at it. I look for leaders when I look for recruiting. I mean, I want to see a kid in a really close game, and I'd love to see them lose. That really is good, because you really get to see the real person. And so I'm looking at them. They're all good players. They're all good students. Like forget that. I'm looking at the intangibles. So I want to see how they react when the coach yells at them. Are they making eye contact? Are they listening? How do they react when they throw a great pass to somebody and they miss the layup? Are they rolling their eyes, or are they patting them on the back? How does their team look at them? Does their team look at them as a leader? Like, you're the best player on the team, and you're coming down to crunch time, and like, nobody's throwing you the ball. Like, there's something wrong here. They don't see you as that. In the free throw huddle, are you the one that's doing this? When you're on the bench, are you cheering for your team? The ref makes a bad call. What are you doing? Are you looking up in the stands to see what your parents have to say? Like, there's so many things I look at, because however they treat their parents is how they're going to treat me. And so I want to make sure that, they know where to draw that line. And so you learn a lot. I mean, I look for red flags. I used to say, I can fix that. It's kind of like when you get married, you go, I can change that. So now I look for red flags. Like, and I ask tougher questions of people around them. And so you learn a lot more. I think that's all we have time for. Oh, we got one more? I guess we got one more.
I have a quick question.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. You coached a lot of years, a lot of great players. Who's your top 5 you're going anywhere, anytime with?
Well, of course, Melissa Lechneitner would always be number 1 on my list. She was a fabulous captain. She was a tremendous, and she committed to Notre Dame as a sophomore. And honestly, I would be like, you can come over and visit. You can call. You can come to games. And she was like the easiest kind of low-key recruit. But when she got here, she made a difference. We've had some great players. Skylar, actually, being from South Bend, she was phenomenal. Jewel Lloyd was probably our most talented player. Arike was really exceptional. I mean, I think the thing that those two brought is a swagger that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Like, women don't have a swagger, and Skylar brought that swagger, and suddenly I was like, I need more swaggers. Let's recruit some more people like that. So, Ruth Riley, going way back. There's just been so many. 9 of them are still playing in the WNBA. 2 of them in the finals, didn't win, but it was a great year. So yeah, Lex my favorite, but I don't know.
So we have come at the end of this terrific event. Thank you, Muffet. Thank you, Anne, for a very insightful, challenging, and inspiring conversation. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your great engagement and questions. And please join me in thanking Muffet especially, and have a small gift.